Jude, how have these talks been going? I've only been on one.
Uh, I I'm really whoops. I've been really pleased with it. I mean, just on a sort of a human level, it's been nice to have these sort of appointment connections with folks. But in general, like the response has been really good. We've had great turnout for them, and people watching them, rewatching them when I get them on YouTube. Unfortunately, that process has been really slow. Uploading things to YouTube takes forever. Um, and we're adding more and more. We're adding some stuff in the. We just added an extra week. That's going to be actually. I was going to reach out to you about it today. That's going to be all stuff for organizers and admins. So more like people who are trying to start youth programs, and as opposed to sort of the coach side of it, more of the administration side of things. So
Cool.
how to do background checks, how to do all of that stuff, all the little things that can be kind of daunting if you want to start a youth program or an adult program, that sort of thing.
Great.
How to build a league schedule.
Jude, can you enable the chat box?
It should be as soon as somebody chats, it should go there.
Oh, here we go.
Is that not working?
Yep, that's perfect. Thanks,
Okay.
Sam.
All right, I'm going to start recording. Whoops, as soon as I let. Awesome. All right, we're going to get started here in just a moment. And welcome, Bethany. We don't have anybody in the waiting room right now. So if you, Jen, if you want to if you want to talk about what we see on the screen.
Sure. And then I'll pass it over to Jude for a very brief intro and some stuff for the meeting. So if you are to throw all your phones and everything on Do Not Disturb, get a quick beverage if you're able to, get some note-taking stuff because we're going to be doing some reflection and activities, writing things down. And we are also going to do some things with our hats. So if you happen to have a hat on hand, can be anything, just throw it on, even if you don't have a video on for today. And then I'm going to stop sharing and pass it over to you, Jude.
Awesome. Full screen mode. Full screen mode. There we go. All right, welcome everybody. I was just mentioning how much I have appreciated these opportunities to get to know people. I think that I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces from previous trainings, and I really appreciate how invested our community is in growing and becoming better coaches, becoming better leaders for our player community. It's really heartening in a time when I think many of us are feeling a little unmoored. So it's just it's really inspiring me to double down on the stuff that got me excited about being a part of this community. So thank you for being here. Thanks for being a part of it. Thanks for supporting Dis Northwest, all that stuff. And for supporting the communities. There's just folks from all over the country here and all over, and the way that folks are committing to growing their communities. It's just awesome. Sorry, I'm rambling now. You'll see on the screen, just kind of the rules of the room. Love to see you edit your name to include where you're joining from, include a pronoun if you're comfortable doing that. This sounds like this is going to be a more interactive session than maybe some of the others. So make sure that you have your cursor over your mute button. Get ready to mute and unmute when called upon. Love to see all of your faces, so keep your camera on if you're comfortable doing so. Because this is going to be pretty interactive, I want to ensure that we are practicing both and thinking. Both and thinking results in a collaborative mindset that allows for the validity of other perspectives and makes space for individual views to coalesce into a solution that benefits all of us. And also want to encourage the step up, step back thinking that many of you are familiar with from group discussions. Step up, step back thinking acknowledges that everyone has equal value in a discussion. Most of the time, white men speak first and often loudest. It's often unconscious and it's often not intended to be offensive, but it is a reminder of systems of oppression that we've all internalized. Take a moment to reflect on whether you're one of the folks who wants to share their idea and feels comfortable sharing their idea first. Your idea will still be there in a moment. Take a second, let somebody else share theirs first before you pipe up. Use the chat or the little raise hand emote to ask questions, and we're still adding more of these sessions. So if you think you have something awesome to that you want to do a long or short training on, reach out to me at youth.director@disnorthwest.org. Speaking of youth directors, I'm going to hand it back to Jen. Jen has become for me in my role at Dis Northwest. Jen has become a really, really trusted source for input and insight. And I always come away from my conversations with her feeling more inspired, feeling wiser and smarter about the things that I want to do. And I just always appreciate her drive and her commitment to growing Youth Ultimate, especially on the girls' side. So really, really, really happy that Jen gets to be a part, is agreed to be a part of this training series. And I'm stoked to sit back and learn. So it's all yours.
Thanks. All right. I'll share my screen.
Oh, you're going to edit your name. You go into participants. and next to your name, you should be able to see, you should be able to click on your name and give you an option.
Cool. Well, thanks, Jude, for the introduction. And I wanted to start by sharing a short story with all of you about how I became fascinated with off-field teen gatherings. So in 2017, the Bay Area youth scene looked a lot different than it does now. About 17% of our youth were girls, which was actually a lower percentage from the year before. All of our events were open division only, and most of our coaching staff were men. That was the same year we failed to recruit enough players to have a U20 girls YCC team. And a lot of the girls were on the cusp of a full-on rebellion. They were rightfully with the way that we were handling things. So I decided to host a listening event where Bay Area DISC staff would sit and listen to how girls were feeling and what we could do to help. We actually held it in the hotel lobby during YCC as a way to bring together the 20 most invested girls in our community. I set the stage by simply saying, I'm going to provide 3 separate prompts to this meeting. Then I'm going to shut up and simply listen and take notes. This is your space to let us know what's on your mind, unfiltered. And I really learned a ton during that meeting, and it was clear our relationship with them changed for the better. They knew I had their backs and I was there to help and listen. We implemented a lot of ideas that the girls suggested that day, including having 1 male and 1 female coach for every YCC team, which we still do today. And we have many high school mixed girls and open playing opportunities that now extend into middle school as well. It's really amazing to see how far in just 3 years, the success of that event got me really excited about designing and hosting other gatherings for our community. For a gathering that didn't take too long to plan or execute, its positive impact continues to shape our community. So I'm really excited to share as much as I can with you all during this session. So to kick things off, if you can see our introductions and reflections, I would love for people to type in the chat box what hat you're wearing. And Deirdre, I can answer your question a little bit later. Nice. Sweet. I'm really excited that we're all wearing hats today. We will be using them a little later, but it's nice to sort of get a perspective. Nice. Jude, Molly Brown. I love it. I love all the ultimate hats we have on there. Ultimate Peace. Nice. Joy, if you can, are you able to unmute your mic and just do
yeah, did that work?
Ultimate Peace?
Usually when a lot of people participate in these, the video quality goes down when everyone's using their video. So I had mine off.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. So what we're going to do is actually the activity now that we know what hats we're wearing. So if you can, note paper and a pen, and in 5 minutes, and I'll set a timer, you're going to answer 3 questions. The first one is, why are you here? What is one thing you would like to learn by the end of the session? And using only 1 word, how do you feel right now? All right. Great. Thanks for filling out those 3 questions. Before we move forward, if everyone can take a look at the one word that they wrote down of how they're feeling. And based off of the sort of like happy, sad face scale that I put in there, if you could, like, where would your feeling words stand on that scale? And input that number into the chat box if you're able and willing to. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So we're going to dive into the logistics and agenda. The purpose of today's session is to help leaders create and reinforce positive and cultures on their teams. And I hope to do this by giving you the necessary tools and resources to intentionally design and host off-field team gatherings, which is our medium for creating these cultures. So as a note, this session is going to focus predominantly on designing and hosting aspects of team gathering so that you can leverage this new tool to further build a positive team culture off the field. So before we move forward, I wanted to go over some key words and what they mean in this particular space. They may be defined different ways elsewhere. So because I'm not a huge fan of listening to myself talk, I would love for folks, they can either write in the chat box or raise their hand, use the raise hand function, and I'll call on you and you can read one of the definitions and I'll tell you which one to read. A shy group. Anyone who wants to read who would like to read gathering? What the definition of gathering is. Thanks, Jude.
I was still muted. Gathering, the conscious bringing of people together for a reason.
Thanks. And oh, great. Jude can do one. Great. Who would like to read the definition of team? Great, Strat.
Hi, sorry, I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand. Team, a group coming together to achieve a common goal.
Awesome, thanks, Strat. Who would like to read culture? Ooh, nice, Bethany.
Culture is a group's shared outlook, attitudes, values, morals, goals, and customs.
Fantastic. And positive, Sam?
Positive, seeing the good in people.
Nice. And last and shortest one, equitable. Joy.
Fair.
Perfect. We did it. I love it. Great. So that's what we're working with today. Agenda. So moving forward, we're going to be dividing our learning for today into 3 different chunks. So it's going to be learning a concept, reflecting on this concept, and discussing this concept in groups or in an activity. So we're going to anticipate spending about 65 more minutes in this group. We may end early if needed, but I'm a big fan of not ending late. So we're going to end at 11:30, which is our time. So for today's session, I have some basic group expectations that will help facilitate the right type of environment for our learning today. So as a group, especially online, let's not assume that silence means agreement. So instead, let's ask questions, use reactions, or use the chat function to better understand one another. As a group, let's recognize that technology is going to fail us. So using patience and humility to get through these hurdles together is going to be super helpful. Scott's in this group, but we recently did a team meeting and this worked really well. So instead of us trying to unmute and mute, which can take time and get a lot of feedback, we can use spirit fingers as a clear, visible sign of support instead of talking. So if there's something that I'm saying or someone in your group are saying that you connect with or support, you can just do this instead of having to mute and unmute. And let's definitely challenge each other to observe and be curious. This is going to take a lot of brain power, but it's going to help us learn more efficiently in the long run. So based off all of the logistics and everything, how are we feeling moving forward? So if you can use the chat box, just let me know I'm not ready for this, or like, yes, I'm on this train. Let's go. Ooh, 6, love it, Scott. Awesome. Sounds like we are ready to go. So the first thing that we're going to do is a breakout activity, and I'm going to need Jude's help with this one if possible. Basically, what is Jude's going to go into groups, and I would love all of you to take 5 minutes. I'm only going to give you 5 minutes, and then we'll take you out of the breakout sessions. But I would love for you to discuss and share a team gathering that was fun and engaging. It could be any type of event, whether it was a team meeting, a bonding event, whatever it may be. And then before you come back, just keep in mind that after 5 minutes, we're going to have one person from each group share any common themes from your discussion. So make sure that you put your name or just say, hey, I'm the group leader in the chat box when you're done, and then I'll call on you to share.
Jen, I forgot. Did you say 2 or 3 people? I don't remember.
Yeah, somewhere around 3 or 4 would be great.
Okay. Give me a moment. 5 minutes.
Hooray. Hi, everyone. All right, so if folks can write in the chat box who is going to be their lead contact. Great. Let's start with Bethany. If you can unmute yourself and just let us know what common themes you found in your conversation.
Yeah, so in our group, the common denominator was food. It seems to bring people together and it seems to be a motivating factor. So whether you're buying pizza or you're doing a potluck style, people bond over food. That's kind of what we learned.
Awesome, thanks. Gabe, if you could unmute yourself and share.
Sure. So a common underlying theme for us was communication. And so the kind of the three events that we talked about were kind of roughly similar in that they were trying to facilitate better communication between teammates, like learning more about either their communication styles or, like what what motivates them as a way to kind of bring people closer together and hopefully kind of lay the groundwork for future communication.
Awesome, thanks. And Scott.
Yeah, Neil and I talked about, we both coach teams that are significantly younger than us. So trying to find ways to connect with them. We talked about playing different kinds of games. So Neil was talking about doing like a rules quiz. And then on some of my teams, Jen, I don't know if you know this, but we do a coach's Jeopardy. So it's kind of like break the barrier between like players and the coaches and get to know everybody better.
Awesome, thanks. And Strat, if you could unmute and share.
Yeah, me, Ty, and Sarah Heath got to chat. Our themes were that there were icebreakers, food, and fun.
Awesome. And Deirdre.
That are kind of equalizers, like a bowling night, a team hike, and also cooking and dancing together, or going out dancing, just where you're, off the ultimate field, maybe the opportunity to break up some of the clickiness that can happen, or the friend groups where everyone is just kind of in beginner space as well.
Yeah, absolutely. These are all great things and awesome ways to build community and trust and positive team culture on your teams using activities. So we're going to get back into all right. So the importance of why. When we're thinking about designing and hosting team gatherings, the most important question to answer is why. So why are you consciously bringing people together, i.e. what is the reason? This answer will actually the when, how, and what for your gathering of event. So it's kind of like the catalyst for the way that your event is structured, who you invite, the space that you rent or you use, how much time you're going to spend in the event, the structure, what you personally provide, and then what you also ask for people to bring to the event. So typically, the more specific answer to why, the better the event is going to be. An example of this is I'm hosting a team potluck to help players connect with one another off the field. Each player is going to bring their favorite dish to share and explain to the group why they brought it to the table. So all of these pieces kind of like feed into the players connecting with one another off the field. So one thing to keep in mind when we are hosting gatherings is really understand and recognize the power of a group. So, we use group for important reasons. reason, really well designed brings all better to people and collect teams. So what we're going to go next is we're actually going to do some reflection. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes. So we'll go until 10:45. And we're going to actually spend 8 minutes on this. I apologize, even though it says 5 on the thing. On your note-taking device, brainstorm one specific purpose, either why, to host a gathering for your team or group. So when you're done, you can put it into the chat box. But what I want you to do is, if you've finished answering this question in a couple minutes, really dig deep and think about how you can make it a more specific why. And then what we're going to do is we'll just have people unmute and share a little bit more about their why when they're done. Sound good? All right, everyone. How about you take a minute and start typing in the why of whatever event or team gathering you were thinking of. Awesome. I'm going to pick a couple, if you don't mind, a little bit more about them. So, yeah, let's have Bethany. Do you mind explaining a little bit more about a gathering to make a group decision, like season goals?
Yeah, so a lot of the time, in order to create buy-in or to have buy-in to your goals, to make sure that everybody on the team is aligned, you have to have a group discussion. Usually the full team, including the coaches as well. And maybe there's been some pre-planning by the coaches and the captains on how to guide that discussion, but a lot of that time you need to give players the space to voice their opinions, to voice their concerns even, and kind of share enough information to the point where eventually a decision is made about, okay, this is the direction that we want to go in. And if we're not all immediately aligned and on board with that, how are we going to get to a place where we are aligned in the same direction about who we want to be and what we want to strive for this season?
Sweet, thanks. And Neil, I loved your little added note. Can you just explain a little bit more?
Yeah, my pleasure. Just one sec, let it catch up. Can you hear me and see me? Or if you can see there.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so I generally have been coaching adults, and just getting together, especially at the start of the season, we have a lot of turnover as more of an introductory touring team. There's a lot of people that don't know each other well, and I find having an opportunity to get together and get to know each other early on in the season allows people to communicate in a more friendly way and really want to build each other up because they see each other more as friends rather than just strangers, where it's easier to criticize other people for dropping or make mistakes or things on field. So building that community and doing it by getting to know each other.
Awesome, thanks. And Alyssa, could you explain a little bit more about connecting players from different ultimate backgrounds and programs?
Yeah, so our community doesn't have a clear college feeder or anything like that. So we have a lot of people from all over the state of Florida, a lot of players from Latin America that come to potentially play for our team. So there's not clear unifying language or plays and stuff like that. And people didn't go to school together. So we have to be very intentional about the way that we create social situations so that way we don't become cliquey, and cliques have been noted as an issue before. So trying to be more intentional about that.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I love all of these whys. They're really great. So this is basically, once I create a basic outline of the who, what, where, when, why, and how of my gathering, it's sort of time to take those pieces and translate it into the event themselves. So at this point, I know why I'm hosting an event. I know who I'm going to invite. I know where I'm going to do it. I know what time and how long it's going to be. And I kind of have some vision of how, right? Like those are a lot of the descriptive words within our why. So when I design gatherings, I'm, you know, to start, I'm always going to let the purpose lead the charge. It really is the, you know, the ship in the ocean. Like it's going to lead a lot of the decision makings that I have, whether it's what type of activity am I planning, how am I going to greet people, all of those pieces. So what I do is I actually divide a gathering into 6 separate sessions. The entrance, the introduction, defined structure, execution, conclusion, and then the exit. One of the most overlooked pieces of a gathering is actually the entrance and exit of an event. People need to be transported from elsewhere to your gathering and back again as fluidly as possible. Nothing's more jarring than an abrupt start or end to an event. In fact, it kind of ruins all of the good work that you do in the middle. So for entrances, you can do something as simple as providing people a personal warm welcome. Hey, I'm so happy that you're here. Everyone's through in the dining hall, or like whatever you may say. You know, things like hanging a curtain for folks to walk through, again, to sort of like, I am in this space now. Performing a unique high five with each of your players, like we've seen that in a lot of entering the classroom to go and learn for that teachers do. So on the back end for the exit, you know, in terms of exiting out of the space, going back into elsewhere, you know, things like handing out a final parting gift, doing a final cheer, or selecting a player to give the final word. Those are all like really cool ideas for how to exit the space. When Scott and I did our most recent team meeting, which was like the initial team meeting for our U20 girls team, you know, we played a fun game where everyone on our Zoom call had to make a like puffer fish face, and the last person to do it gave the final word. And so it's like a really silly, you know, we're all like equalized making goofy faces. But, you know, then the last person, if you're like, I'm not into doing this fish face, then they are tasked with giving the final word. So entrance, exit, getting into the space, leaving the space. But the most important piece of your gathering, which I've like highlighted in blue, is actually the introduction and the conclusion, because it's just what people are going to remember the most. The first 5% and the last 5% of a gathering. It's important to remember not to do any logistics or thank yous during these moments, because it's sort of like, it's not quite the place. You can actually put those in closer to the middle. But instead stick with the purpose. So if you're asking folks to be vulnerable during your gathering, start by being vulnerable yourself. Really think about setting the tone. Introductions and conclusions don't need to be long, they don't need to be complicated, but really think about what is the first thing that I'm going to show people that this is the purpose of this meeting, and then how am I going to wrap it up, make sure that people really understand this was why we were all here. So now kind of comes the part in the middle. So it's defining the structure and executing. So we define structure so that participants understand what to do in this group and in this space. There may be other rules, expectations, norms outside of your gathering. So it's really important to paint everyone a clear picture of what you expect in your space. This is what we do here. This is where you do all of your logistics. So agendas, group norms, agreements, anything like that. Then there comes sort of what I call the meat and potatoes all gather, dinner gather where you eat, and if it's a event that you raise money. So if your gathering includes learning pieces, especially with team gatherings, we're getting a group of kids together, or we're getting players together, and we're going to talk about our goals, or we're going to talk about how we want to structure the season. You can do these learning pieces with what I like to call the learn, do, and reflect learning cycle. So you teach something, you share it, they actually do it in some capacity, whether it's an activity or anything like that, and then they reflect. And, you know, Scott's heard this a million times before, but I'm a huge fan of, we learn so much when we reflect. So this year we actually implemented journals on our YCC team. And even in our girls leadership program that I run, a lot of it is, we'll listen to a concept, whether it's a video or me talking. We'll do an activity that pertains to the purpose of that. And then I'll have them sit down and reflect and write out what they felt about it, how it went, any things that are like sticky that haven't really that they need to sort through afterwards. As a note, if you're doing any sort of mentally taxing activities, or if you're trying to build a really solid, long-lasting trust between people, really think about balancing slow, which are sort of the light conversational things, with fast time, which is sort of the action-oriented, you know, we're writing our goals. People, it's really tough to be able to build rapport and trust among people when all you're doing is action-oriented stuff. Their brains are focusing all on that. And it's important for that slow time to build up that trust, even if it's lighthearted conversation. So being able to intersperse that into a gathering can be a really helpful tool. So I recognize this is a super quick overview in designing a gathering, but I also recognize that you know, there's basically, I wanted to open the floor for folks to ask questions and share curiosities about any of this. So this is kind of like our Q&A portion. If folks could just put in the chat that they have a question, I'd love to ask you to unmute, and then you can share your question with us, and I'll do my best to answer. Or if someone else has something to add, that would be great as well. Deirdre, did you say you had a comment?
I do have a comment. So when we had our bowling night this past fall, she's a sophomore, but one of the girls on the team, and we have 3 teams, the JV boys, varsity boys, and the girls team. And she came into the bowling alley to our check-in table and just couldn't do it. She just felt overwhelmed. There wasn't even a lot of people there. So in the future, I'm going to make sure that I have like 2 girl captains / leaders and 2 guys to help bring them in to the space in instances like this, to help someone who may be struggling to kind of enter the space and help them work through their panic and fears and hopefully participate. So I just wanted to share that because we had that instance happen. So I really appreciate how you laid out your event sections. That's all.
Yeah, and that's the same for practices too, right? The first time that people are sort of welcomed onto the team, it can be really intimidating to sort of enter that space. And so really thinking about like, how are people entering the practice space? How are we going to include them, invite them, and make them feel welcome? Because it can be a really scary thing, whether it's off the field or on the field, of being able to like enter the space and be mentally ready to go. Scott, you have a question.
Yeah, so you've coached, captained, you know, adult club teams and, you know, coached a lot of youth. When you have helped to like design these types of meetings with adults versus youth players, what part of the designing process or the executing process, or like what's the biggest difference between, if any, between like the two age groups?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Scott. I think for me, one of the most important pieces, a lot of the activities will typically be the same, but one thing that I do keep in mind is it's likely that the adult players have a little bit more experience when it comes to thinking about some of the more like mentally taxing pieces, right? So they've typically been in more team events, they've typically been in more team gatherings. They likely know people a lot better in that space, so they're more willing to share. I think they're sort of like accustomed to the gathering, they're accustomed to team events. So being able to like, I think you can dive in a little bit more into the deep end a little bit faster than you can with younger groups. Granted, like I've done a lot of team gatherings with girls, and I've noticed that they're in general, and I'm using this as a generalization, in general, girls are able to focus a little bit more on the activities. So you don't have to take as many breaks as you need to. I've also done some little team gatherings, little moments with younger boys. And a lot of times you need to give some free time or some, opportunities for people to play or like get out some energy before you bring stuff to folks together. So yeah, the big thing is like building that rapport and trust in younger groups, especially if you're the adult in the room who's leading it. And then when you get to adults, you can sort of dive in a little bit more readily. Sam, do you want to read your question?
Yeah, I can do that. Can you talk about how you might apply the learn, do, reflect procedure for a goal setting meeting?
Yeah, for sure. So if you're going to do a goal setting meeting, and we do this all the time, one thing to do with your group is so you're learning what exactly a goal is and defining what a goal is in your group. I know when Scott and I have done sessions, we've talked a lot about how our goals are not, we want to focus on process goals than any other type of goals. So being able to define and give a clear definition of what type of goal or what things that you're seeking. The do part is you can do fun activities like I have asked people to write on Post-its what would be like how do you want to feel at the end of the season? And so they've written down exactly how they want to feel. And then we've had we've picked some leaders out of our groups, and they'll actually start matching those Post-its of similar clusters of themes. So like, I want to feel like I've given it my all, or I want to feel like I've bonded with my friends, or I want to feel like I've learned a lot during that season. And based off of that, you can actually form your values or your goals. And then of course, the reflection piece of that is the kids can sort of take 5 minutes to journal about, okay, we have these goals for the season. How do I feel about them? Am I still confused by them? Maybe I'm really excited about them. Maybe it gives me slight pause. So that's sort of a potential option for the learn, do, reflect for goal setting meeting. Any other person? Okay. Yeah, Alyssa, you had a comment. Do you want to share with the group?
Yes, hold on. This was in relation to the first question you answered about the difference between like working with younger people and adults in club. My experience has just been that, again, I coach a college women's team. They tend to just think that we are adults and therefore we know what we're doing. Whether or not that's true is besides the point. So I have felt that their ability to buy into whatever activity is planned, it tends to be, it's not, you know, I don't have to sell them as much on what we're doing. They're just like, they have a reason for this. So the introduction and the defining the structure doesn't have to be as in depth. Whereas with peers, you know, they have their own ideas about how this should be run or whatever. So being very, very clear that this is not a waste of their time is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. And all of these different pieces are going to be molded to the group that you're doing, right? So depending on like what you know about the group, and sometimes it's important, like it's much harder to, for me at least, to do group stuff with people I don't know. As people I do know, but yeah, sort of suss out like, I know and typically this is how it's going to go. And I totally agree. Sometimes with adults, you definitely have to like, structure piece is important. Like, this is how this is going to work here in this space. Sarah, you had.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you or anyone else have any specific examples, kind of like the one you just gave with the post-it notes of activities that would help build that kind of team culture and for youth specifically.
Yeah, I think one of the most important pieces that is more of a generalization, but I can get into more specific is I've found with youth that it's going to take a little bit more patience and time to build a deep rapport with the kids. I know, again, like Scott and I coach a U20 girls team. They're happy to follow directions and do that. But if you really want to like dig deep and get them to feel connected to you and willing to open up and be vulnerable, it takes more than one instance of a gathering to like build that up. So in terms of activities to build a positive team culture, we've done things like we have our preset values that we have every season that Scott and I want, like say, this is how we'd like to structure our team. So we actually have the kids divide up the paper, like we give them all a piece of paper, they divide it up into quadrants, and then we have them write the values on each quadrant of the paper. And they'll actually go through and do an activity where they will write down what their definition of that value is. So one of our values is confidence. And they'll write down, this is what confidence means to me. And then we'll go through, we'll do popcorn share. They'll flip the paper over, write the values again. And then I ask them specifically, what tangible action items are you going to do to help support this value? So it goes from really thinking about what does this value mean being on this team to what can I actively do as a person to that. And it helps them really about, you know, what it really means to contribute to that value. And maybe like positive team culture or equity is a value that you use. And then they can really think about what that means and how they can act upon it. Happy to have them share if they have any really fun activities. And Strat, you have a question.
Yeah, I was wondering how you would recommend adding structure to something that might just, you know, I've been suggested to multiple times to host a community building gathering for our YCC community across all teams. And given your lovely structure, I'm wondering how to add that to like a picnic or something like that, where it's supposedly a building community or get to know you space.
Yeah. Sometimes those can be really small things. So it could be like when people enter the space, they're given an index card with 4 names on them. And they have to find those 4 people, and maybe there are 4 people on those other 4 YCC teams, and they have to introduce themselves and learn one interesting fact about them. So while your whole, like the structure, the meat and potatoes of it is, we're fun, we're playing spike ball, we're doing can jam, we're eating burgers, they actually have to go out and seek and find someone to like fulfill the mission of the community event. So that's just one example of how you might be able to do that within like a very sort of fun, you know, laid back environment.
Thanks.
Cool. All right. Well, where do we go from here? So I would love for you to take a moment to look back at what you wrote originally for one thing you would like to learn by the end of the session. And using the chat box, what is still unclear to you? And hopefully I'll try and answer like 2 to 3 items that are shared in the chat. All right, well, it sounds like I did my job, which I'm very excited about. I do have some fantastic resources. So worksheets, oh, how much time do you recommend devoting to a culture building session? Thank you, Joy. It depends on the group. For younger, there's always going to be a threshold of how to keep people's attention span. So middle school age kids for culture building, I would say, and I'm just throwing out options to test around, something like 1.5 to 2 hours would be your maximum amount of time. Middle schoolers, and a lot of it would my recommendations would be, a lot of it would be like fun and engaging activities interspersed with like more meaningful things. So it could be something like everyone goes in and has food, and then when you'll do a fun introduction game, then maybe you can do some like values work. And then if you want to get a huge giant post-it board, you can actually have them all draw on it for like their values or like whatever they want for their team to do. But yeah, usually, and you'll have to take breaks. That's another thing that is super important, especially with online sessions, which we did not do today. But taking breaks for people to be able to mentally reset is also really important. Think about other activities or programs. That's a great point, Alyssa. So in terms of helping empowerment, confidence, and trust among team members, a lot of it is going to be balancing that slow versus fast time. So you actually build more trust with people when you have more of these like one-on-one conversations. So doing things like pair shares or doing check-ins. From our girls program, every morning we do a rosebud thorn. So people get to sort of just check in and like relax and it builds that trust and that like I've connected with someone. The empowerment and confidence, as someone who's hosting the gathering, a lot of it is observation. So things like if you notice the, girl who's not speaking, or people are interrupting or not recognizing that she already said that thing 5 minutes ago, which happens. It could be that you make a point of reiterating what she said or having her talk, or, one thing that we did for one of our girls is we actually asked her ahead of time, hey, we'd like to give you a speech. during our team meeting. So if you'd like to prepare, we want to give you some time to do that. So, and doing a lot of check-ins too, like how did that go? Gauging things. There's a lot of different activities you can do. And meetings, to answer your second point, which is what I get into, it's you need to ask yourself the question, is this the end or is this the beginning? And I'm a huge fan of having team meetings interspersed throughout the season. I think doing something at least once a month can be helpful, even if it is like a slow hangout, just potluck kind of piece, because it's a way to really bond and support the values and culture you want when you're not doing like the mental, physical work on the field. So I'm a big fan of hosting, regular team meetings throughout a season. So yeah. So just to let you know, I do have some resources for all of you, worksheets, sample team meeting outlines, which includes the Coach's Jeopardy on there. And I will put it in the chat if you'd like, because I realized I didn't know who was going to be in this group. But if you'd like to sign up, I will just send, like it's a quick Google form with your email address. I will send you the PDFs and the Google links to all of that. So I think I have like 3 different worksheets to send out to all of you. Structured questions. Would love to hear more about the structured questions asked, expectations set around the listening event. Oh yeah, Gabe, yeah, that's great. It's a different type of gathering. So basically I asked 3 questions. The first one was, what are, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember like the exact wording, but it was, what are the things that you're most struggling with right now as a female athlete in our programs? The second one was how can they help you specifically? And then the third one was, if you had unlimited resources, what programs or initiatives would you want to see happen in our organization? So those were the 3 prompts for that. And we did very few sort of expectations agreements in that group, aside from the fact that I set the expectation of I wasn't going to talk. I was just going to take notes. And we actually had our executive director there too. And I said, he's not going to say a word either. We're here to listen. The girls had already built a rapport in that space, so they knew how to manage and share time with one another. So I was much less concerned about those girls interrupting each other or dominating the space. It was far more important for us to set the tone of, we're here to listen specifically to you and let them engage. There was some, okay, now we're going to go into the second question, or now we're going to go into the third, but it was very, hands off on our end and just sort of letting them talk and share. Let me see, Neil. I just heard you mention a pair share activity one way. I've been a part of a past team discussion on gender equity. We think pair share, where you do exactly that when answering a question, and it's a great way for a team to engage with others. Yeah, anytime you're discussing a topic, doing smaller group sessions is a really great way to further engage, build equity, have people connect with one another. Big group sharing can be really hard, especially among youth. People feel really uncomfortable sharing in front of a group of 20. They feel much more ready to share in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. All right. I'm on afterwards, of course, but feel free to contact me. My email address is jen.pashley@bayareadisc.org. You can get more info by signing up tinyurl/team gathering. I'm happy to send out all of those materials afterwards. And feel free to support Bay Area DISC is my local org, which I'm the youth director. And of course, I run a girls leadership program, which is free of charge. So if you feel support, the same with DISC Northwest, the folks who have been running the show on here. And as a final closing activity, since we have been doing a lot of work and a lot of thinking, we're actually going to do a symbolic gesture for wrapping things up. Our thinking caps, which we put on at the beginning of the session, I'm going to count down from 3, and then we're all going to take our thinking caps off. And then we can sign off the call. But of course, if you'd like to just ask me a couple questions after our symbolic leaving the space, that's fine too. So thinking caps off in 3, 2, 1. There we go. All right, take care, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Jen. Thanks, Jude.
That was great.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. That was awesome.
Yeah, good.
I have a bunch of summits planned when we get to actually get back together. So this is really, really useful.
Good. Yeah. I'm glad.
Awesome. All right. Unless the people that are hanging on actually have additional questions for Jen, I'm going to end the meeting.
Yeah, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit more about the listening event, if that would be all right.
What's up, Gabe?
So I guess the kind of the purpose of wanting to do something like this potentially is, so we have an A side and a B side to the team. In the past, it's been kind of the B side is very much dependent on like how many people there are in the program as a whole, and whether they have like people that are willing to lead, whether they have coaches. And this year they had maybe even more people than were on like the A side. And we had a mentality of, oh, this is still live on YouTube. I don't know. I don't know if I should go into it in that case, but
maybe we can ask Jude, do you mind turning on the live YouTube chat?
or end the recording or something like that.
He is the host, but yeah, we could always say bye, and I can directly, let me see. I will just message you our Zoom, and then we can hop on.
Cool.
There you go. So I can catch you on there.
Awesome. Okay, I'll see you there in a second.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks, Jude.
Bye.